Hello, and welcome to this NJCU Center for the Arts digital event. We would like to ask everyone to please keep your cameras and microphones off during the program. There will be a Q&A section at the end of the program, and we will only be accepting questions and comments via the chat window. At the bottom of your screen if you are on a computer, or possibly the top right if you are on a different device, you should be able to see an option for chat. If you click that, it will open the chat window where you can type your questions so that they may be read aloud and answered. Thank you, and enjoy the event. Please note, the views and opinions expressed in this virtual event and presentation are solely those of the individual artists in their personal capacity and are not reflective of nor represent official policy, position, or views of New Jersey City University.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'm Stephanie Chaikin. I'm the director of the Center for the Arts at NJCU, and we're so delighted that you're here this afternoon for Italy is Out. I'm going to introduce our presenters. Dr. Edwidge Giunta is a professor of English at NJCU. She has published several books, including Writing with an Accent, Contemporary Italian-American Women Authors, and she has co-edited anthologies The Milk of Almonds, Italian-American Women Writers on Food and Culture, and Personal Effects, Essays on Teaching, Memoir, and Culture in the Work of Louise DeSalvo. Her co-edited anthology, Talking to the Girls, Intimate and Political Essays on the Triangle Fire, will be published in 2022 by New Village Press. And then Marie Garcia is a senior at New Jersey City University. She is an English major with a concentration in creative writing and a psychology minor. She participated in the 2021 Lati Colloquium for NJCU, and she is a member of the Student Events and Publications Committee. So we have an amazing program today. I'm going to turn it over to you, Eddie.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and welcome everyone. I'm very excited about today's event. As an immigrant, I'm someone who cannot escape from a condition of someone who has left and has become part of the diaspora. And becoming part of the immigrant experience, or the large immigrant experience where you left Italy, Poland, Colombia, or any other country in the world is a very, very particular experience that reshapes you. But there's something that's really remarkable about this experience of being scattered, being separated from the homeland, and that's that we kind of find each other. We find each other and we seek some form of reunion and reconnection. And you know, this is what this amazing project the Mario Badagliacca and Derek Duncan have created is doing, is in Italy's out, but I would say also Italy's in. It's an extraordinary project that brings together photography and writing and people from different parts of the world, and even today from different time zones. So we are thrilled to be here with you, and welcome to our audience, and we hope you will enjoy the conversation. We will have a presentation of the book, some short presentations from the contributors, and then there is room for Q&A. So please feel free to post any questions or any comments on the chat, and then Marie Garcia will be reading those questions and then ask them, as many of them, during the last part of our event. I'm going to introduce the editors of this extraordinary book, of which I'm very fortunate to be part. Mario Badagliacca is a freelance Sicilian photographer. He studied international relations and politics at the University L'Orientale in Naples, in Italy, and photo reportage and photojournalism in Rome. Along his photographic activity, he has always collaborated with nonprofit organizations and he has been involved in humanitarian programs. His work documents migration, life on the borders, human rights violations, and social issues. Derek Duncan is professor of Italian at the University of St. Andrews. His research focuses mainly on modern Italian literature and film, with an emphasis on intersections of gender, sexuality, and race. Most recently, he has written on cinema and literature of migration. He's interested in working with artists and other creative practitioners to explore alternative ways of presenting academic research. He's currently working on a book about the sinking of the Randora Star off the coast of Ireland in 1940, when the lives of over 450 Italian men living in the UK were lost. The book focuses mainly on the recurrent treatment of the tragedy in recent literature. Mario and Derek, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And Derek, I think you will get us started.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eddie, and thanks to Stephanie as well and all the colleagues from NJCU for allowing us to present this book, which I'm going to hold up. It's super new and just off the press, and I realise that most of the contributors haven't even had the chance to look at an actual copy of the book yet. So we're really excited to be able to talk to you about it tonight. I'll just say a few words and hand over to Mario, who's going to talk about the book's main event, really, which is his own photography and the project which led up to that. I just want to say that the book is one of the outcomes of a collective research project in the UK, which was looking at cultures of Italian immigration, really on a global scale. There were 13 of us working on different forms of Italian mobility to North America, South America, to the UK, to Germany, to Australia, also to North Africa and to Ethiopia, and trying to bring them together in a way which certainly wasn't harmonious or homogeneous, but made some kind of sense, was an enormous challenge. And it certainly gave life to what Eddie was saying, that Italy is also in as well as out. But really, the book comprises mainly of Mario's photographs and photographs of objects which his subjects chose to represent their ongoing attachment to Italy, but also contains 12 short essays by people who were in different ways connected to the project. Some academics, some people who've got a biographical connection, some of the artistic practitioners that we work with, who use their own kind of skills and perspectives to reflect critically on Mario's work and say what the photographs of the people and things actually mean to them. I think I'm just going to hand over right away to Mario, who can talk us through some of his work. Mario, can I pass over to you now?
Thank you, Derek, and thanks, Edwidge and Stephanie, for the invitation. Thank you all for being here today. I will try to share my screen so I can show you some picture. Okay, do you see the screen? Okay, well, I started Italy's Out in 2015 after Derek asked me to join the TML project as an artist in residence, and he invited me to explore what Italian identity or Italianità mean to Italians living abroad, focusing on England, the United States, and Argentina. And after the Derek proposal, I asked myself, how can I photograph something complex like the idea of Italian culture? How could I photographically represent that culture? At the beginning, the only one thing I was sure of was that I didn't want to photograph pizza makers, pizzaioli, or chefs, because I was afraid of ending up using stereotypes related to Italians abroad. And anyway, since I started working as a professional photographer, I had focuses on borders in the broadest sense of term, on migration to Italy and Europe, human rights violations. And this new project was the other side of the coin, the other part of modern Italy history. And for me, Italy's Out was a good chance to understand the history of the people who left their native country. And so I tried to explore these issues, adopting the tools I used for my previous works on documentary photography, viewing things from a social and historical angle, cutting across time and space, and looking at three different generations of Italians abroad. I needed to go deeper into their story to understand if there were moments of historical rupture or elements in common between the different groups of Italians in England, United States, and Argentina. And those were the countries in which I developed the first stages of the work. And then 2 years later, I eventually introduced Tunisia and Ethiopia. And in order to reconstruct the life story of the people I portrayed, I asked each of them to show me 3 personal items, which they took represented their link with Italian culture and their own roots. And so I made portraits of these people in their familiar environment, and also photographed their chosen object. And the first generation I chose to involve were Italians who emigrated midway through the 20th century, and who in many ways represent what we imagine as the archetype or even stereotype of the economic migrant and self-made man. And the second group was I portrayed were people of Italian origins who were born abroad. And I was especially interested in finding out what kind of relationship you can have with your parents or grandparents' culture when you live across 2 cultures and sometimes don't even speak Italian. And this is Valerie Lee's case, whom I photographed in Clerkenwell, the historical neighborhood for the Italian community in London. And you can see her in the picture. And London is interesting because in the contemporary imagery, it's mainly connected to the idea of a new generation of Italians who moved there. And it's true, but London is also a historical place for the Italian diaspora, which once revolved around the Italian Church of Clerkenwell, where every year in July, still now, the procession of the Madonna del Carmine is celebrated. And Valerie represents what I am saying. She's the family of Valerie is originally from the Amalfi Coast. Her paternal grandparents were from Ravello near Salerno. And Valerie was born and grew up in Clerkenwell, and her childhood memories are linked to her family and community's everyday life and specific places. She remembers her grandfather speaking Italian with his friends in Clerkenwell, even if she doesn't speak Italian. And the third group I portrayed are Italians who emigrated in the last 20 or 30 years. This is where the idea to call the project Italy's Out came from. I think that when you decide to leave your country for whatever reason, in some cases, this also becomes a criticism of your society and its political class. Maybe that's not always the case, but many Italians from the last generation I met left Italy because they felt their country didn't reward their skill. Italy has long been in a state of economic crisis and characterized by exploitation workplaces, and also its social, political, and economic system is often dominated by the older generation of male and practices of nepotism. And perhaps this is the reason why for the Italian ruling class to acknowledge the fact that Italians are still emigrating is more or less a taboo. And Sara Tesfai is an example of the last generation of Italians out. She has Eritrean origin, but she was born and grew up in Florence. And after graduating in economics, she moved to Cambridge, where I met and photographed her. Now she lives in Lisbon. And Sara is helpful to open a window to other places whose history intersect with that of Italy. Eritrea was once an Italian colony. This leads me to talk about the second stage of my project, which focuses on the Italian communities in Ethiopia and Tunisia. Concerning the Italian history, I found these countries symmetrical and opposite. I mean, Ethiopia interested me because I wanted to understand the contemporary effects of Italian colonial occupation in East Africa and how it affected the lives of families who had lived there for generations, going through major historical events such as changes of government, wars, and dictatorships, both in Italy and in Ethiopia. But even there, I found migrants from the last generation who had moved to Ethiopia to work for Italian companies or hoping to build a new life project. An example of that is Giorgia Giunta, whom you can see in this photo. Giorgia has lived in Ethiopia since 2006 when she co-founded with her Ethiopian partner Fekat Circus. And this is a circle school and social and cultural hub for disadvantaged young people in Addis Ababa. By the other hand, I chose Tunisia because it's the destination of a Sicilian diaspora, which is the other shore of the Mediterranean as its natural geographical and cultural extension. Italians living in Tunisia tell story that during French colonial occupation, the authorities regarded Sicilians almost the same as Arabs. And a story which represents this attitude is that of Rita Strazzera. Rita was born and grew up in Tunis, and but she has Sicilian origins. Her grandfather was a fisherman from Marsala, a town in Sicily, and he moved to Tunisia in the beginning of the 19th century, and Rita was handed down the memories of how difficult was the life for Sicilians during the French occupation, or how racist the French authorities were toward Sicilians at the time of colonial occupation. And as I mentioned before, I decided to shoot a series of portraits of people in familiar surroundings in order to match faces with stories. And also in order to create and reconstruct their personal history, I asked each of the subjects to show me 3 personal items which represented their link with Italian culture and their own roots. And this second element is still perhaps the most surprising aspect of the work to me, because I had expected family memorabilia like photos, souvenirs, things handed down by grandparents. I photographed very intimate objects which were different from what I had expected. This is Peter Covino's case. Peter showed me a pillow, is the picture on the center. It's a pillow stuffed with wool made by his mother. Some of the Peter's family memories are linked to his mother working with wool. And also here we have Claudia and Edwidge, and I was also shown completely different items, for example, with a political dimension. Such was the case of Edwidge and Claudia, who chose to show me some feminist records. Maybe later Claudia and Edwidge will tell you all about it. And also, you can imagine my surprise when Alberto Di Lorenzi in Addis Abeba asked to me to photograph his father's carpenter bench. What you see in the first photo on the left is the family carpenter bench, 5-6 meters long, and next to it another not movable object, the family wooden stove. And after I had arrived at the Alberto's house, I understood why he had asked me to go there, because he could not carry the object. And also in Tunisia, another not movable object was this wall on the left side. was in the Alfonso Campisi house in Tunis. And Alfonso is originally from Trapani in Sicily and now lives in Tunis. And for him, his Maiolica wall is a connection between Tunisia and Sicily, because in the past centuries, the Maiolica art was brought to Sicily by the Arabs, and the wall tiles are used to decorate the houses of both the Sicilian and Tunisian bourgeois. And in conclusion, as I mentioned before, perhaps the items are the most surprising aspect of the work, and we can talk a lot about this. They represent a wide range of cultural meanings, and they trigger connection between the subject family story and other cultural dimensions, such as music, art, politics, history, and so on. Also, it's interesting to notice the significance that each photographed subject gives to his or her personal object, and how the object typology changes depending on the generations. For example, the generation deeply rooted abroad often find their cultural roots in family objects. On the other hand, the new generation's objects are often small items brought from Italy during their journey when they moved abroad. And for instance, the first book, Italian book they brought to the new country, or other small items connected to their departure moment. And of course, there is a relationship between a chosen object and the moment in life to which the object refers. Okay, this is we have many examples of that in the story I collected, but for now I stop here. This is a brief description of the work behind the book, in which you can find dozens of stories. Thank you.
Thanks, Mario. That was a really brilliant, I think, overview of the work that you've done, the work which you initiated, you accomplished yourself. What I'm really excited about as part of this presentation is the fact that we're actually going to hear from two of the people who you actually photographed in this project. And I know that Peter, I think, also is in the chat room, and it seems to me that is something that I've never had any access to, and I'm really fascinated to know what it was like to have you take people, have you take a picture. So we're going to hear now from four of the contributors. First of all, from Claudia Giunta, who is one of the people who was photographed by you as part of the project. And then two of the people who've contributed essays, Jacopo Colombini and Giorgio Wall. And then we're going to go back to Edwige, who appears in the book both as a writer and as a photographic subject. So we'll maybe come to Eddie right at the end. But first of all, we will go to Claudia. Claudia Giunta was born and raised in Gela in Italy. After she graduated from the University of Catania Catania Law School, and became a lawyer in Italy, she moved to the United States, where she received graduate degrees from the University of Georgia and the University of Pennsylvania, and where she has lived for more than 30 years. She's a citizen of both Italy and the United States and works as a corporate lawyer in Manhattan. She loves classic rock, politics of the good kind, her native Sicily, and the sea. She lives with her husband, 2 sons, a dog, and several cats in Leonia and New Jersey. Then we'll go on to hear from Jacopo Colombini, who holds a PhD in Italian Studies from St Andrews University. His research interests range from critical migration studies to post-colonial theory, transnationalism, and memory studies. Until the summer of this year, he was responsible for the development of an intercultural help desk for refugees with disabilities for a German NGO. He's now working as a teacher of history and Italian in Berlin. His work for the ARHC TML project was on the transnational symbolism of Lampedusa. And our final contributor, Giorgio Wall, who was also a postgraduate student on the TML project and who graduated from Warwick University, is now a translator from Italian to English. She works as a publishing assistant for the Emma Press, an independent publisher based in Birmingham in England. She also delivers workshops for the Stephen Spender Trust, a UK charity promoting multilingual creativity in schools. But Claudia, first of all, if we could go over to you and hear a bit about your experience of working with Mario, that would be great.
Thank you, Derek. Hi, everyone. I'm going to read some reflections that were prompted by the experience of being photographed by Mario for Italy is Out. As I sat down on the sofa waiting for Mario to take a picture of me and my sister, I felt overwhelmed by memories of my childhood and of their connection with America that I didn't know existed at that time. My passion for Bob Dylan when I wasn't even 10, and my very first own Bob Dylan's album, a gift from my sister Eddie. I learned all the lyrics, and although I didn't know half their meaning, I sang, trying to emulate Dylan's accent. When my sister started teaching me English, I must have been 7, I felt an instant connection with the language. I never spoke it the British way, like all my friends who learned it in school did. It was always the American way, even with my thick Italian accent. When I moved to America in my mid-20s, it wasn't because I had decided to leave Italy. Instead, I had decided to go to America. I didn't want to be anywhere else. And it didn't matter what I was going to do, whether I would continue to be a lawyer after being one in Italy or something else. Yet I didn't always feel that determined. After my first trip to America at age 18, I fell in love with America. I was devastated when I had to return to Italy, but the thought of being able to live in America was a wild thought in my mind back then. America changed me in so many ways, or maybe it simply uncovered parts of me I didn't know existed. I was an extremely shy child and an insecure teenager. In America, I discovered that I had confidence, passion, determination. My desire to come here made me defiant. My parents did not approve. My migration caused a temporary breach with my family in Italy, a wound that took a long time to heal. When Mario asked me to pick 3 objects that I brought from Italy that were meaningful to me, the first thing that came to my mind was my music and my albums. I also considered things I brought back to Italy from my first trip to the US. I took 303 pictures during that trip with my big, bulky camera and my film rolls. My room in college was plastered with many of those pictures, newspaper articles about a Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA concert I had gone to, and other memorabilia. In the end, I chose 3 albums because my passion for music feels very much connected to my love for America. I chose Bob Dylan's Hard Rain, my first Bob Dylan's album where I knew all the songs and did not know half the meaning. I chose 2 of Francesco De Gregori's early albums. De Gregori, himself a Bob Dylan's lover and very influenced by American music, literature, and culture, was my other big music passion as a child. The title song of Buffalo Bill, one of those 2 albums, has a line that says, quote, "Se avessi potuto scegliere tra la vita e la morte avrei scelto l'America," end quote. It translates to, if I had to choose between life and death, I would have chosen America. Perhaps my choice was not as dramatic, but in the end, I too chose America.
Thanks, Claudia. That was really, really interesting. And I'm sure people will have questions for you at the end. Can we go on to Jacopo now? Could you give us your presentation? I should say that all the contributors who wrote for the essay were given a sort of carte blanche to write whatever they wanted, just however they wanted to respond to Mario's work. So Jacopo, can you go on now?
Thank you very much. Originally, I was planning to read a short excerpt of my contribution, but for time reasons, I decided to share just some thoughts that came to me while reading the book once again. I'm one of the privileged ones that get the copy, actually. So Mario and Derek's book does not only pose the question of what it means to be an Italian abroad today, but it also offers a number of creative and different answers to this question. Both the photos and the contributions are a rare mix of academic reflection and personal memories. In my contribution, drawing on Stuart Hall, I wanted to shift the focus from the where we are from to the how we think we are from. In this, I wanted to emphasize that despite the structural and conceptual constraints shaping our being Italian, we always have a certain degree of agency in the construction of our identities. So these processes are pretty much contextual. As this book shows, being or being defined as an Italian in the US, Scotland, or Germany reflect a very different set of experiences. So the factors at play are many, and I don't have time to mention all of them here, but today I would like to stress 2 points. First, I want to highlight how we can actively learn to use our understanding of being Italian to both counter these stereotypes and narratives that are associated with Italianness, and to not get stuck in the canons of a pre-given and unchangeable institutionalized cultura italiana. In this case, we could say that to defend what we define as Italian, we need to embrace change. We need to look beyond the limits of the national, as we did already in this book. And second, and finally, looking again at the photos of Mario, I wanted to stress how time, or more specifically age, affects our constant redefinition of our being Italian. So here I have a wish, or perhaps a suggestion for future studies or projects. Somehow the image that the book gives us is that self-reflection on our identity, the asking who we are, is something just for adults. Maybe we should take a moment to reflect on the experiences of one of the categories of people that do not directly appear in the book. So the experiences of children or young hyphenated Italians living around the world. So the question is whether for them this sense of nostalgia, unhomeliness, and so on, that works as a red line connecting the multifaceted practice of Italian as witnessed by Mario's work, is actually at the center of their experience of fare gli italiani. I wonder whether if we look at our children, at pupils studying Italian at school, we can find Italian identities that are not necessarily built on forms of othering, rootedness, but on openness and proximity. Thanks.
Thanks, Jacopo. That, again, was really thought-provoking. Georgia, are you able to give us your presentation now?
Yes, I'm just going to read a tiny bit from my contribution, if that's okay. It's not a presentation. When I told her where I was from, she said with a wry smile that her husband had warned her never to trust the English. He'd been taken prisoner by English soldiers and ended up in Australia, well loved by a farming family. They begged him to stay, she said. They even promised to leave him their land. Just think about that. But he'd come back to Italy and to her, just walked through the door as if he were returning from a day's work. She showed me the essential vocabulary booklet he'd been given as a prisoner of war. She kept it in a little tin on the dresser next to a set of shot glasses her granddaughter had brought back from Ireland. At the top of the second yellow page of print, more useful text had been added by hand. Dead. I'm sorry. She'd moved to the seaside town before it changed its name and became the provincial capital, before two towns were merged and grew into a bustling port city. But she kept the mountain ways of her childhood, and the stories she told were about life in a small hilltop town marked by mass emigration. Compaesani had gone to America, to New Jersey and Canada, Belgium and Germany. She remembers walking to school and eating cherries in the snow. That's where she cooks bean broth in August, her daughter adds, fanning herself in the torrid heat, as I consider the suggestive and improbable combination of snowflakes and spring blossom. That's why, when my brother had something to say about it, she clouted him one with that ladle. At this, the old woman feigned brandishing the ladle, and they both laughed. Her cooking utensils are all worn and smaller than modern ones. There is one large pan lid, dented through years of use, and with a handle made out of half of a wine cork, a repair which bespeaks her unassuming ingenuity. I find her in unexpected places. The beat of a synth pop song transports me to another afternoon around her table. You know the screenwriter of La Dolce Vita came from here, her daughter tells me. And paparazzi, the local word for clams, inspired the name of the film's intrusive photographer. She mimics the mechanical clicking of camera shutter leaves while miming with her hands the opening and closing of shells. Really? I turn to the old woman, fascinated. Who knows? She shrugs and smiles with a typical abstract interest.
Thanks, Georgia. That was a fantastic taste of your really beautifully written essay. I mean, one of the things I love about the book is the way in which different voices as well as different faces emerge through the writing and the photographs. But our final speaker today, we're going back to Edwige, who is both a contributor, writer of one of the essays, but who also appears, as we've seen, in one of Mario's photographs. So Eddie, if we can come back to you.
Sure, not to mention related to another subject, so I am multiply involved. I'm going to read a very brief excerpt from my written contribution, which is a meditation on the disorienting absence and void that follows the immigrants. But Jacopo's remarks made me think of something my American-born daughter said when she was 8 years old. And she said that she was 50% American, 25% Italian, 25% British from her father, and 10% Jewish from her stepfather. So by age 8, she had accumulated a generous 110% of identity. So I gather that identity has kept growing. Okay, so the piece is titled L'Amico. For a while, you believed you could find home in America. Search hard. Scatter tokens of Sicily in every place you inhabit, like the clay sun that blesses the sunroom looking out on your backyard in Teaneck. Bleed eggplants with salt to get rid of the bitterness. Buy regional Italian cookbooks. Fill these places you call home, all 13 or 14 of them in 3 decades, with the sounds of Italian music. Shop at Jerry's Gourmet in Englewood, argue with a worker over ricotta salata, and storm out, swearing you will never go back. Have sumptuous meal with Italian-speaking friends and friends enamored with Italy. Write about Italian-American women authors. Become one yourself. On Washington Street in Hoboken, meet Teresa, an old Italian lady in raggedy clothes who tells you she used to play with Frank Sinatra when they were children. Smile and think of old Sicilian women full of stories. Watch your husband water the rose bush outside your tiny home in Jersey City and remember your father's patient, devoted gardening. Drive down the New Jersey Turnpike, think of Sicilian towns where the sea, sky, trees have been poisoned by fumes of factories. Believe that New Jersey is a little like Sicily. Home is a smell, a touch, a taste, a song in your head, a gesture, the colors of the sky, sfumature. Memory is heavy, so is distance. You never arrive anywhere, you go lost on the way. There is no English word for your aching desire, l'amico, an ancient Sicilian word that conjures the yearning for something you had and lost. It spreads from your gut through every cell of you. L'amico nestles in the curvature of your spine, the back of your throat, the arc of your eyebrows, the middle of your chest, your tightened fists, your accent. You wander between history and myth, memory and desire, forever a Sicilian transplant, another one who left, so that she could feel compelled to return. Immigrant, expatriate, traveler, exile, another one who did not learn to go home only to live. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie, and thanks to all the contributors for giving us such a rich flavour of the different directions that the book takes all of us in response to Mario's really brilliant and very moving photographs. I think we've got about 15 or 20 minutes, Eddie, for questions and for conversation. Is that right?
Yes, so, we should invite our audience to post any questions or comments I have. But if it's okay, I actually have a comment for Claudia. Because we're sisters, Mario photographed us together, and we were both familiar with the objects. And what is interesting to me is that I chose very Italian things. I chose my feminist records, which are very much part of the political, very Italian moment. So important for me, they shapes who I am to this day. And then I chose a wooden box that belonged to my great grandmother with old photographs and my grandmother's old eyeglasses. She chose American or American-oriented objects. So I'm wondering if, Claudia, you could talk a little bit about that choice, because I seem, more like to fit the category of the immigrant who tries to carry Italy on her back, and instead you seem to be like to coming prepared with all your American tokens.
Yeah, so yes, my experience is a little bit different from yours, Eddie, and I think we've talked in the past, although I have never really analyzed why this is the case, that I'm more American oriented. I know that I always, and I noticed one thing as I was choosing my objects, that I had a passion about Bob Dylan and about America as a child, and I didn't know, of course, that one day would bring me here. So, but I thought it was very significant. I always, as I said before, I always saw, I wanted to come here more than I wanted to leave Italy. And I think in a sense is because my childhood and my teenage years were not really that great. I wasn't like the most popular girl, and I had, some teenager, I felt some rejection issues as a teenager. Coming here was a sort of rebirth for me. And I really wanted to come to America. And when I came here, like I said before, I discovered things in me that made me feel better about myself. Perhaps these were not new things. Perhaps these characteristics were hidden in me, but they made me feel good, a new person, confident, and other things that I was missing as I grew up. And so that's why I have this attachment to America. And as much as I love Italy, I could never see myself going back for good. Once I read this interview, long before I moved to America, with Oriana Fallaci, who, of course, lived in Italy, but also lived in the United States. And she very much loved the United States. And this was an interview with the Gente, which is an Italian magazine. I read it when I was a teenager, long before I ever knew that I would move to America. But there was this thing that she said that really struck me. The interviewer was asking, what is it with you and America? You love Italy, but you love America. What is this attachment to America? And she said, and I quote, she said, l'Italia è la mia mamma, l'America è mio marito, end quote, which translates, Italy is my mother, America is my husband, America is my spouse. And years later, as I thought about these words that didn't seem, when I didn't know that I was coming here, that very much feels like I feel. My love for Italy is more of a maternal thing, but my love, my passion is for America.
Thank you.
So Eddie, I do have a question for you.
I actually wanted to ask something to Mario. Let's just, you and I can have a conversation. So right. Mario, when you took these portraits of people, and there's such an extraordinary connection that happens between the photographic subject and the photographer. How was the taking the portraits of the people and then taking the photograph of of the objects that chose? In what way were the objects revealing to you in the moment? Like, what was the process?
Oh, yeah, but for me, I like to put this moment, the object and the portrait all together. For me, was important the situation with the time I spent with the people I photographed. And of course, it was interesting because I was listening the story. I spent a lot of time talking with them. But then the object were revealing me other aspect of their life and their history. Was something complementary to the story I was telling. And because the object were revealing other meanings that maybe weren't revealed during the conversation, and the object also are there. You can fix the object looking at the pictures. You can reason behind the meanings of the object during the time. It's something the object condense a lot of meanings that are the meanings that the owner gives to the object, but also there are other kind of meanings that are different for me, that I look as external subject, that object. So it was something that was fixing and was in connection with the story I was listening and collecting.
Thank you. Derek, one of the things that you do in your work is trying to go beyond that divide that the academic discourse creates between academia and real life. In what way working on this project with Mario did that for you?
I think one of the things that it did, and I think this is a really important one, was that it involved all of us working together. Yeah. So often academic work is really kind of like, particularly in humanities, is very self-centered. It's focused on, the academic as a researcher, then a writer doing their book, doing their article. But what was really great for me about this book was working on the research questions about Italian migration with a photographer, someone who was bringing a kind of different set of skills, a different optic, quite literally, to the work that we were doing. And then the next step was inviting, people like yourself, Georgia Jacopo, Donna Gabaccia, for example, contributes an essay to the book, and asking them to write a short, accessible, and kind of like more critically imaginative piece of work than they might normally undertake, and bringing themselves into it in a way which is both personal but self-reflective. I mean, you know more than anyone how challenging that is, and how to do it successfully in your own writing. But also bringing in people like, and I think she's in the room still, Lucy Caliparo Marcuzzo, the Australian textile artist, to kind of like respond both to an artist working in a different medium, but also to academics working on research questions. So for me, the thing is really all about collective work, collaborative work. It's about kind of like call and response. It's about listening and responding, and just kind of like going beyond your very often narrow thought processes.
Thank you.
Thank you for that answer, Derek. We have a question in the chat for Mario. This is from Patricia. Correct me if I mispronounced that, I'm sorry. They ask, was there something you found in all the subject that could be called Italianita?
Yes, of course. Okay, never culture is something homogeneous, but of course, in every place I visited, Italians have different story concerning its own community, with its own specific trajectory influenced by this history or the social, political, or cultural context of the specific country. And but at the same times, there are common elements everywhere. Which lead idea of Italianità. For example, the role of family is the most important, I think, because the family is a very powerful core that operates as a social and cultural pivot, even on building and maintaining the Italian transnational network. And also another important element is the religion, because it's another important common aspect among different places. A religion for Italian is a tool for their identity everywhere. And sometimes even sport is another common element, especially soccer. I don't know in the United States, but for sure it's something important for Italians in England, Argentina, Tunisia, and Ethiopia. For example, in Addis Ababa, an important place where Italians meet is the Club Juventus. And so all these elements were composing a big puzzle, leading a common denominator among different places and toward an idea of Italianità.
Thank you for that. Really nice answer. Kirsten adds, they were also wondering how you and the rest of the subjects would define Italianata.
So shall we go like Jacopo, Georgia, Derek, Claudia, one by one? Let's see what catalog we come up with. Jacopo, you wanna go?
I was just trying to get my notes, but maybe I should not look at my notes. I should be spontaneously say something. I don't know. I mean, when I wrote my contribution, it was really about, it was an act of self-reflection on my private life, because I just had my first son here in Germany, and I was thinking, okay, I'm writing about Italianness. In theory, I'm half German, half Italian, but I always define myself as an Italian, and start asking myself what it means for me, Italian. And of course, you have all these things I also mentioned before, nostalgia, this idea, I don't know, this passion for food, these things that defines you. But I think what's the core, and I think it's my answer also that emerged from my contribution, is that we cannot define as Italianness. Italianness is contextual, is subjective, is always developing. I think the Italianness I was writing about 2 years ago and a year and a half ago, when I had my first child, when I was in Hamburg, was another one than the one I might think about it now that I'm in Berlin teaching Italian in a school and having another child. I think I see identities, in this case Italianness, as a tool, a set of skills that we can use strategically. And I think what it is important that any sort of identity does not lead to exclusion. Identities need to be inclusionary. They don't need to create borders or distinction, otherness. They help us define who we are, but they're not fixed. And this, we go back to my beloved Stuart Hall. We change, and we constantly redefine ourselves. So I cannot say it. I'm saying Italian is who I am, according to the moment, to the person I'm talking about. Of course, there's more things that I could mention, but it's not necessary.
So sorry, I don't remember if I was next, but I can go next. So I don't know that I would. So I was listening to what Jacopo was saying, and he said that, you know, even though he's half German, as Italian, but he considers himself Italian. And my experience would be in both Italian and American. I never say of myself that I am Italian, that I am a mix of both, 50-50. I always think of myself as 100% Italian and 100% American, as if they were almost different, but the same person, because my feelings towards each are very much 100%. When I'm in Italy, or there are parts of me that I feel completely Italian. And then I also feel completely American, because as I was saying before, I really embraced and felt embraced by America. I would say, I also agree that maybe it's not possible to give a definition of Italianità that really applies to all, but I want to focus on one thing that I think is very Italian, and that I happen to miss, even though with all my love and praise in America. I think we have a particular kind of warmth, and a physical kind of warmth that I often miss here in the United States. We love each other. We have affection for each other that often expresses itself in very physical ways. Maybe unfortunately not so much now with the pandemic and everything, but that is something that is really important to me, that I never gave up, and but it's really fully comprehended. I think you need to be Italian to really be fully comprehended and how much it means.
Georgia, you want to go next?
I don't know. I should specify that I'm not Italian. I'm not Italian anywhere. I was a beginner when I studied it, so I was coming at it very much from an outsider. And I think probably what's stuck with me in relation to the question of Italianità is Jacopo's, as well as what you've just studied now, but your first response about saying that it's about looking forward, not just looking backwards. And I think that was kind of in my response to the complete freedom that Derek and Mario gave us, that I just wrote about what I saw when I saw the objects, which on the one hand, I was thinking that I don't know if the coffee pot, the mocha, actually made it into the final selection of the book, but one of them was the mocha, and there was a stove. I remember a participant had picked a stove. And also Lucy's installation that Derek mentioned previously about Italian textile art. And I thought, on the one hand, these objects in my research I saw in quite kind of stereotypical, like they'd be pictures of them on a restaurant wall, or it was a kind of very flat idea, this is Italian identity. But when I thought of the person that these objects reminded me of, and their life course and their relationship with the world and the various identities that was connected to, so not just Italian, but places all around the world, and then in another path the Bangladeshi Italians and Egyptians, it was that idea that the objects kind of offer us up that way to look forward. So I'm the same. I'm afraid I couldn't give any essence, but as I say, I'm also not Italian, so.
Thank you, Georgia. I think that in some ways, whatever being Italian means, if anything, I think there is something kind of hyper aware and ironic in being Italian outside of Italy, and I find it that I'm most comfortable with it when I am playful about it and self-aware that I'm kind of wearing a costume and outside of the location. And so if I have that awareness of wearing the costume, then I don't have to be completely loyal to it. And that, that paradoxically fits very well with my snail attachment to carrying Italy on my back, to carry memories of Italy in my back. Derek and Mario, is there any last remarks that you want to add to these interesting conversations?
Just one thing, I'm fascinated by, well, the people and the objects, as just to pick on up on one of George's points in a way. For me, the most fascinating object in the collection, and they're all really interesting in their own ways, is the baseball. And I would encourage people who look at the book to look out for the baseball and what it means to the particular subject who chose it, and think about how an apparently American object is really an Italian object at the same time, depending on the person who owns it. And for me, Italianità, or any other form of identity, is also about subjectivity and what the subject makes of it. And I think that came out in your conversation with Claudia as well. You know, basically, it depends. Mario, have you got any thoughts?
Yes, I would like to ask Hedwig and Claudia if today they would choose 3 different objects from those they choose when I photographed them. It's a hard question, I know.
Yeah, I never thought of that.
What time are you coming? Shall I put?
Always I am trying to
put the pot on the stove. I'm very happy with my choices. I'm very happy because I think they balance out also. I mean, these are elements that also that come to life in my American work that has to do with women and feminism and memory work. So they get, there is this infusion of the traces of these objects. Cla?
No, I wouldn't change that. I'm even happier, I think, today with my choice than I was at the time, because I've had the time to reflect on the choice, and I see in that choice connections that or deeper connections than I thought of at the time. Part of that also I discussed when I read my thoughts. So. No, I wouldn't change them. Maybe I'll add another the Gregori album.
Yeah, the new one.
Or maybe I would add the Gregori's album called Viva l'Italia.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you.
We come to the end. I wanna thank everyone, and I can't wait for other presentations of the book, because I'm really, I know Lucy and Peter are here, and I'm really eager to hear from all the other people who have written or been photographed for the book. So thank you so much, Derek, Mario, Claudia, Georgia, and Jacopo, and thank you, Stephanie, and everybody from the NJCU Center for the Arts for making this possible, and to our wonderful audience for being with us today. Stephanie.
Awesome. Thank you all so very much. It's so inspiring, and it's inspiring to think about wherever we're all immigrants here, right? So even thinking of our history and how to hold our lives in that context is amazing. So thank you so much, Eddie and Marie, and all of you amazing presenters. It's fabulous. I also want to thank Anna Carhart, our theater manager, Justin Tinker, our technical director, and Sabrina Sabalo, our box office manager and Zoom coordinator. And we have a whole season of amazing programs coming up. So I'm going to spread my screen a little wider so I can read everything. This Friday, we have a virtual artist talk from our art galleries, Wonder Woman 12, a health survey. So please join us. You can sign up at njcu.edu/arts. We'll show that on the screen again so you can see it visually. And we have on Friday evening, an evening of opera scenes in our Ingalls Recital Hall. And this weekend, we have a winter jazz fest at NJCU, Saturday and Sunday, all day and into the evening on Saturday night. Our art galleries are also going to be open, so you can come and partake. And again, njcu.edu/arts to see all our upcoming programs. Eddie has a whole slew of programs, one a month, coming up in the spring. So we'll have the information on that. And that's all I've got. It's been a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much. I'll toss it back to you, Eddie.
Thank you, Stephanie, and my fellow host, Marie Garcia, and Marie represents our wonderful students here at New Jersey City University. Marie and I and many of our fellow students will be working on this program closely in close collaboration with the NJCU Center for the Arts. So including another 100-word marathon in February for those of you who have come before, and I look forward to seeing you at future events. Thank you so much, everyone.